So after installing the winch, I have this switch which I installed to the switch plate, and everything works great. But sometimes when you're actually using a winch, you need to be able to, like be out in front of it so you can see exactly what's going on with all this stuff, and make sure that nothing's getting messed up or anything like that. So I decided to purchase this wireless remote. This is from Warn, as you can see. In order to do that, you need to get to the solenoid. Where I chose to install it is down underneath here. I knew that I was going to be taking all this stuff apart again. I didn't want to do all the videos at the same time. I don't want to install everything at the same time, and that way I still have stuff to do. Like if I installed everything at the same time, it would, what do you do after that? I guess find something else to work on. But anyway, so in order for me to install the harness for the wireless remote for the winch, it looks like some of these wires are going to be attached to the solenoid, which is way under there, and all the wires are facing to the right. And like, I probably could access it by taking off some of these panels, but I would rather go another direction. So I'm going to be taking off the roof and the windshield and this front panel here. I got everything torn apart again, which, is fun. It didn't really take that much time to take all this stuff apart. On the cover it said plug and play, and at least with this in particular model, it's definitely not plug and play. So I have this. I'm gonna figure out where to install that, and then it has all of these different connectors. Got some greens, got some blacks, got a red, and as well as an inline fuse. And then it's got, I guess these are adapters, which are going to be going to the solenoid. So I did a little bit of research in advance, trying to figure this out and make sure that it's right. But it looks like I'm going to be unplugging the black and the green here, and then adding those adapters. So essentially I can put that sensor to use for the wireless remote for the winch. So the main thing is where to start. So on the instructions, it said mount this first, which to me seems kind of silly, because if I were to just go and mount this anywhere, then who's to say that the wires are all going to reach all the different areas that they need to go? So I'm going to start by installing the wiring, and then after I know that everything is put in the right spot, I'm gonna then I'll secure this, and then I'll tie everything down, make sure it's nice and clean with zip ties. And on these instructions, it said to use this wire splicer, and no offense to people that use these, but for me and this machine, it's going to be getting wet and muddy underneath there, and to me this doesn't look insulated at all. So I'm going to be using one of these guys here. When I was at the auto parts store, I couldn't remember exactly whether it was a male or female, so I went ahead and bought both, and that way I know for sure that I have the right connection, and I'll go into that in more detail here shortly. So let's get going. So I think I'm going to go ahead and start with the inline fuse, which is connected to the ignition switch. That's what it looks like to the best of my understanding. I actually used a wiring harness, and so this was plug and play. I didn't have to really cut anything there, but on a Honda Talon, it seems like the wires that are white in color, that's actually going to be the key on wiring, which is good. So it looks like I'm going to have to actually tie this in to that. And what they recommended was a wire splice, but I really don't want to do that. So I went ahead and got another connector here. I'm gonna go ahead and unplug this. I'm curious to hear what, this is not my job, obviously. I just do this for fun, but I'm curious to hear what your guys' thoughts are on this. Because to me, I feel like this is better than just like splicing into the wiring. The reason I'm going this route is because over here, from this harness or connector here, from the harness connector, I really don't have that much room to play with. And so I obviously have a lot more over here and then, all of this. So I decided, since I'm gonna have to cut this connector off, I'll go with this one. And that way, if anything ever gets messed up in the future, I know that I can fix it. So I'll start by cutting this connector here. All right. Now, if you if you don't have experience with these, it says all the gauges and everything right there. And this is for stripping the insulation off of the wiring, which is what I'm wanting to do here. Let's see, and that should be right. There it goes. Now, another important thing here is to make sure that once you cut off all the insulation, you don't take off a bunch of wiring with it, which is pretty easy to do in some circumstances. But I'm gonna roll that up. I'll trim off a little bit of the insulation on this wiring here. Then I'll get those tied together and put on a new connector, and it should plug right in. And these are gonna be insulated connectors. And I feel like that's superior to just adding one of those splicers that don't appear to be insulated at all. The exposed wiring is damn near identical in length. I'm gonna tie them together just like that. Some people might suggest soldering these together if in fact this is the route that you want to go, but for me, I'll just make sure that I crimp it really good, and it should be just fine. All right, I'm gonna go get the new connector, and hopefully everything is just plug and play the way that I think it's gonna be. So I got these yellow connectors over here. This is the female end. I'm gonna start by retrofitting that to make sure it all fits. Yeah, that fits perfect. So this is a 12 to 10 gauge wiring connector, and push it down in there, make sure it's nice and tight. I'd rather use multiple connectors and make sure that I have a good connection than put something on here sloppy and stops working when I'm out there on the trail. So these are color coordinated. You can see there's a yellow spot there, and that's again for 10 to 12. Make sure I get it in the right spot, and then crimp. And that's a good connection. Looks like this kind of got bent a little bit. I want to make sure that that little flange there is centered up. Actually, with it being off-centered, hopefully that'll create a little bit more tension on there and keep it locked in place. To me, that's going to be a good connection. That should last for years. So that is the inline fuse connected to the remote wiring here. So I want to make sure that my mission is abundantly clear. I don't want to talk crap about companies and say stuff. I mean, especially because a lot of the time when things like that happen, it's operator error. But Warn winches are obviously not the cheapest out there. This says easy plug and play installation. This was not easy plug and play installation. Like, first of all, I had to splice into this wire right here, figure all this stuff out. There's all types of different connections that need to be installed. The ground wire that they gave me is not an insulated connector, which seems crazy because it's going underneath the hood. The instructions that they gave me are not accurate. They show clearly the wiring needing to go into the back of the switch, which is right here. Now, on a positive note, I went ahead and, with the help of my wife actually, she, you know, 2 heads are always better than 1, but I went ahead and connected everything, tied it into the solenoid, completely disregarded the switch and a lot of the instructions, and when I started it up, everything works just fine, including the wireless remote. So everything is good. I have this that I'm going to be securing now, but if you remember the connectors that I showed you before, basically it took some time for me to figure it out, but so I had to take 2 of the connectors and attach those to the solenoid, take 2 of the wires from the wireless control here, or sensor, I'm not even sure what you would call that, but there was five or six wires coming from this. So one of them was the ground, which I secured right there to the solenoid. The other one was the key on switch, which I spliced into right here. And then the other 4 were the black and greens, and there were different connectors that I installed. So if there's one thing that you can take away, hopefully this doesn't make things more complicated, but if there's one thing that you can take away from this is, in this scenario, the instructions were wrong. I did not have to actually mess with the switch, the control switch for the winch on the dash at all. Like, I just completely ignored that, and it seems like the signal, or the control signal, must come through the solenoid. Geez, that was kind of a pain in the ass, and took a little bit of risk, because once I got this all put back together and started up the machine, it's like, you know, who knows what's gonna happen. Like, maybe it's not gonna work, maybe some of the wiring is gonna get fried. I don't know. This is not what I do for a living, but it all works, and nothing got fried. So now I'm just gonna clean everything up, make sure that all of my connections are nice and intact, sealed, insulated. Make sure I put all the rubber. I mean, there was really only one connector that wasn't insulated that I got from them, so, you know, I don't want to talk all bad. I could just feel that click when I was pushing on it, and that's what I want. Make sure that everything snaps into place, make sure all the different connectors are completely covered with the rubber coating. All right, and now where to mount this guy? I'm gonna mount this and then get all of this excess wiring nice and cleaned up, secure. I'll make sure everything is zip tied, obviously away from any moving parts, right? My dog has been very patient with me this evening. He's used to me taking him around on trails every day, and I haven't been able to do that lately because I've been distracted with this. I think I'll mount something like that right there. Another good thing they did do was, you know, they gave us different areas here for a zip tie to go through, so. You know what I'm gonna do is go ahead and run this one from the other direction, just like if you were installing a plumbing fitting or something like that. So I have one zip tie here in place already. I'm gonna run this one from the opposite direction, and hopefully that will keep everything more secure. Last thing I want is loose wiring or harnesses moving around. It is gonna be harder to get in the backside here. There we go, 2 zip ties. Turn this sucker on. It still moves around a little bit, but it feels pretty solid. I'll start with the most excess wire here. Make sure that I leave this inline fuse in an area that I can access if I need to. Got with some room to play. This is still pretty sloppy. There we go, that looks better. Big part of it is just presentation. Like, I mean, obviously, like making sure it's done right, but you know, sometimes something can be done right and still be ugly. I want it to be done right and look good. That's what I'm going for. So here is a close-up on what the wiring looks like now. Everything should be nice and insulated underneath the hood here. Got the wiring connections together. I have the inline fuse accessible. Now I'm going to secure this just like that. It should be out of the way of everything. Should be nice and clean. There's plenty of slack on the connections, as best as I can tell. The zip ties are cheap, electrical harnesses are not, so yeah, I'll zip tie the hell out of this. And all right, next thing, I'm gonna start this sucker up and show you guys how it works. So I'm going to be using the switch that's on the dash. Obviously that's working. I'll show you what I just did. Just gave it some slack on the switch that's mounted on the switch plate. Yep. And now I'm going to use the wireless control. I think you have to hold these both on until it comes on. And then I'm going to go in. It works.